Hi folks, it's Curtis, your Canadian labor guy. Did a little bit of research and wanted to drop some more facts on the Canadian public regarding labor in Canada and North America over the last 150 years or so. The research I've been doing, I've dug up quite a few stats. Today I'm going to focus on what I consider to be the first trade. If you think back to the Industrial Revolution, most things were made by blacksmiths. Blacksmiths did more than just make horseshoes. They forged weapons. As the technology progressed, they built some big scale items. When they started producing iron, the first blast furnaces were actually built by blacksmiths, because they were using forged rivets, which were rivets that were heated up to glowing orange and then hammered with brute force to hold the walls of the blast furnaces together. So blacksmiths eventually became boilermakers. Boilermakers were born from blacksmiths. The first boilermakers were around 1712, building the first steam engines for trains, among other things, blast furnaces for making pig iron to make steel and steel products. From there, the technology evolved. Boilermakers changed the course of the Civil War. In 1862, the South had a ship with an iron deck, and when the North sank that ship, they pulled it out of the water and built the first completely iron ship. That was built by Boilermakers. Fast forward to about 1907, was when the first welding technology was introduced. They were using electricity to fuse metals together, and that became welding. Again, if you want to fast forward to World War II, in World War II in North America, there were 350,000 Boilermakers. And Boilermakers are blacksmiths, forgers, iron shipbuilders, and that's what the Boilermakers in World War II were concentrating on, was building ships for the Army. Most of the Boilermakers in World War II were women. And can't say enough good things. I believe there's a lady named Rosie the Riveter who was a Boilermaker building ships in World War II. And that's a pretty phenomenal feat. I want to, as I'm in Alberta, I want to talk about Alberta history. In 1947, Leduc number 1 was the first oil that was found in Alberta. Fast forward again to 1964, when the Great Canadian Oil Sand Project in Fort McMurray first started. At the time when they first started building the sites in Fort McMurray, it was over 4,000 tradespeople that were involved. And they were all union tradespeople at that time. And not just Boilermakers, pipe fitters, electricians, carpenters, scaffolders, laborers, you name it. They were all union men and women. The conditions in Fort McMurray are quite extreme. In the winter months, you can see wind chill factors, temperatures around minus 50. In the summer, it can get pretty hot as well. Plus 30, 32 plus 35 I've seen in Fort McMurray. Again, I want to fast forward to 1973. That was when they first started construction on Syncrude. Again, fast forward to 1978. The Boilermaker rate at that time was $12.21 an hour. Today's rate is somewhere around $40 an hour. But again, the cost of living the last number of years has gone up exponentially, but wages haven't. A lot of people think that unions are greedy, and that's not the case. Up until last year, when you went to work on a site in Fort McMurray or any refinery around North America, you got on site, and then they did your safety training on site. Last year, to compete with the non-union sector, we have to do our safety courses before we get to site now. So there's several of them. Confined space training. If you're going into a tank or a boiler or a vessel of any type, you have to have confined space training. Aerial work platform, if you're working from a JLG or a man basket of any type. Construction safety training is the basic one that you have to have. Fall arrest, you have to do a course to know how to properly put on a harness. If you're working in a JLG, you have to be able to wear a harness. That'll stop you from hitting the ground if you fall out of the basket. There's several other courses. H2S. I had to do one last year on bear awareness. There was a lady who got mauled by a bear a few years back, so now we have to take a course on recognizing bears, how to avoid them, and so on. Several other courses. None are coming to mind at the time. H2S. There's H2S Alive and H2S Aware. One is a little higher tiered than the other. But all these courses, before we go to site and do them and get paid to do them, well, now we have to do them on our own time, and we don't get paid for that. And that's not very fair. Another thing I want to talk about are the camps. The camp conditions have declined over the last few years to the point where, you're away from home for extended periods of time, and you're living in a 10 by 20 room, if you're lucky to have one that big. Some are smaller. There are camps up north around the Fort McMurray area that have been shut down due to health concerns, black mold and mice and other pests that are occasionally reopened because it's so busy. And that's not right. A person shouldn't have to live in that type of condition. And one of the big things about these camps is the security guards. They treat you like you're a criminal sometimes. Not all camps. There's a couple of good ones. But most of the camps, sure, there's been cases where there's drunken disorderly and it kind of, one bad apple spoils the bunch. There was an article last September in the Calgary Herald, excuse me, about the camps, and he interviewed a fella, and this was back in 2013 when he did this interview, and this guy said that his dad used to be a logger, and his dad told him that there's like 20 guys in a one-room cabin with bunks spread out, and that was a long time ago. And camps have come a long way since then, that you usually have a room to yourself with a TV and some amenities. But, it's 2018, and I emailed this person in Calgary and told him, I said, you know, you need to interview someone in a current camp, not from 2013, because a lot have changed since then. Some of the executive camps, yeah, they're very posh and high end, but for most of the workers, because it's usually foremen and supervision that get these executive camps, but a worker, he gets a basic room, and the main thing that bothers me about the camps are the lack of variety in the food. They may say they have a lot of variety, but for someone who has a specific allergy, that's very deadly. And they're supposed to have their meals made specifically for them. And I know of people who've been banned because they weren't getting their meals, and when they raised concerns about it, they were banned from camp and then lost their job and then banned from that site for that reason. And that's just wrong. Myself, I suffer from gout, so I have to stay away from red meat and shellfish and turkey, lots of other things that I have to avoid, or I get this painful ache in my foot, and I can't have that when I'm at work. So I'm restricted to the types of things I can eat. And it would be great if there was a better variety of food in the camps. And again, I emailed this reporter in Calgary and tried to get him to revise his article, and I got no response from him. So I'm going to leave it here now because I'm at the 12-minute mark and I don't want to be too long. But I'm going to have another video coming up in the very near future. And I think I'm going to do my next one on ironworkers. Ironworkers have built pretty much all the skyscrapers and bridges all around North America and all over the world. And there's some very highly skilled fellas. I'd recommend anyone to look up the article from 1933 called Lunch on the Skyscraper, which shows the ironworkers several hundred feet in the air sitting on beams eating their lunch. It's a black and white picture set. There's, I don't know, somewhere between 50 and 100 pictures in the set. If you can find the whole set, it's very informative. So I'm going to say, see you next time, folks. I'm Curtis, your Canadian Labour guy. Please like and share my videos, and we'll see you soon. Bye.